Welcome.
Shalom.
Hallelujah.
Shalom.
So,
Okay, let's get started.
an exciting day start study from Exodus 10, Myriads of Ravaging Locusts. If there was enough locusts in the sky to block out the light, could that be called myriads of locusts? This is exactly what happened in Mitzrayim. What do locusts have to do with the sun god Ra? Ra, the sun god, he was the most important god of the ancient Egyptians. The ancient Egyptians believed that Ra was swallowed every night by the sky goddess Nut and was reborn every morning. The ancient Egyptians also believed that he traveled through the underworld at night. In the underworld, Ra appeared as a man with a head of a ram. Do we see any pictures of, I don't even know what to say, how to describe it, but there is one picture that is a symbol of Satan himself, that we see this head of a person and the feet of a goat and stuff like that. So these things still continue today. We laugh at what these people believed, but believe me, they are very alive and thriving today. Pharaoh's pun. Ra is before you. What is this pun? Exodus 10:10. And he said unto them, Let Yahuah be so with you, as I will let you go, and your little ones. Look to it, for evil, that is 7851 Ra, is before you. In Exodus 10:10, Pharaoh says to Mosheh and Aharon, during one of their ongoing exchanges, literally, See, for there is evil before you, or more idiomatically, look, you are up to no good. The Hebrew word Ra is evil, and it is the name of the Egyptian sun god Ra, who was the head of the pantheon. In this bilingual pun, made possible by this linguistic occurrence, not only does Pharaoh deny the request of the Israelites to worship their Elohim, but he also states, as it were, that Ra, the false sun god, is before you. Strong's H7451, Ra, and it's originally from 7489. Look at these definitions for this word Ra. Bad, evil, adversity, affliction, calamity, distress, and mark, mischief, misery, not, noisome, sorrow, trouble, vex, wicked, worse, wretchedness, wrong. These are definitions of the word Ra, the sun god. And on the right, we see it's inclusive with the feminine Ra as an adjective or noun. Look at the definitions. Evil, bad, disagreeable. And what about that last definition? What do we equate this word with? Malignant. Do we equate that with death in a certain disease? Malignant. That is connected with Ra. Yahuah responds to this arrogance in the next three plagues. Number 8 is the locusts, which blot out the false sun god in midday, chapter 10:15. And number 9 plague is a darkness, and some believe this was a sandstorm, and which darkens the skies for 3 days, chapter 10, verse 22. And the 10th plague, the death of the firstborn at midnight, the darkest part of the night, when Ra is most distant from shining. You'll see that in chapter 12, verse 29. Given the cultural context of ancient Egypt, the reader would have realized the connection between Pharaoh's impudent statement in Exodus 10:10 and the subsequent narrative. The focus was on the worst possible chain of events for the Egyptian nation, and that would be the disappearance of their omnipresent and false sun god, Ra. Exodus 10:5. And they, the locusts, shall cover the face of the earth, that one cannot be able to see the earth, and they shall eat the residue of that which is escaped, which remaineth unto you from the hail, and shall eat every tree which groweth for you out of the field. That 69 is ayin, and it is translated as an eye, and figuratively as the eye of the landscape, or the focus, the focal area of the landscape, the primary place. This is what was going to be covered and taken out of view by all these locusts. The locusts blotting out the sun, or symbolically blotting out the false sun god Ra. The eye of the land and the eye of Ra. Playing on this motif in chapter 10, verse 15, the text states that the locusts covered the eye of the whole land. And this is a rare idiom in Hebrew, but one very much at home in the Egyptian language. This phrase, this Hebrew phrase, most likely is an adaptation of the Egyptian expression IRTR. I don't know how to say that properly, so I just read out the letters. And it is literally the eye of Ra, used to designate the sun, and by extension, Egypt too. Locusts are instruments of the wrath of Yahuah and his judgment. Exodus 10, 4-19, Deuteronomy 28, 38 and 42, 2 Chronicles 7:13, Psalm 78, 46, and chapter 105, verse 34, and Nahum 3, 15-17. Locusts are the instruments of the wrath of Yahuah. Yahuah must deal with sin, but when his people repent and they find abundant blessings that more than compensate for what was lost in the judgment, Yahuah's grace abounds. Yahuah says, I will give you back what you lost to the swarming locusts, the hopping locusts, the stripping locusts, and the cutting locusts. It was I who sent this great destroying army against you. We see that in Joel 2:25. A solitary desert locust, adults, they usually fly at night, whereas gregarious adults, that is swarms, fly during the day. Nahum 3:17. Your guards are like locusts, your officials like swarms of locusts that settle in the walls on a cold day. But when the sun appears, they fly away, and no one knows where. Locusts, these are quite the animals, insects really. In preparation for part 2, let's review Exodus 10, 1-14, remembering the words of the prophets. Again, myriads of ravaging locusts. Exodus 10. And Yahuah said unto Mosheh, Go in unto Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart, and the heart of his servants, that I might show these my signs before him, and that thou mayest tell in the ears of thy son, and of thy son's son, what things I have wrought in Egypt, and my signs which I have done among them, that ye may know how that I am Elohim. And Mosheh and Aaron came in unto Pharaoh, and said unto him, Thus saith Yahuah, Elohim of the Hebrews, How long wilt thou refuse to humble thyself before me? Let my people go, that they may serve me. Else, if thou refuse to let my people go, behold, tomorrow, when? Tomorrow will I bring the locusts into thy coast. Tomorrow, important word. And they shall cover the face of the earth, that one cannot be able to see the earth, and they shall eat the residue of that which is escaped, which remaineth unto you from the hail, and shall eat every tree which groweth for you out of the field. And they shall fill the houses, and the houses of all thy servants, and the houses of all the Egyptians, which neither thy fathers nor thy fathers' fathers have seen, since the day that they were upon the earth unto this day. And he turned himself and went out from Pharaoh. And Pharaoh's servants said unto him, How long shall this man be a snare unto us? Let the men go, that they may serve Yahuah their Elohim. Knowest thou not yet that Egypt is destroyed? And Mosheh and Aharon were brought again unto Pharaoh. And he said unto them, Go, serve Yahuah your Elohim. But who are they that shall go? And Mosheh said, We will go with our young men and with our old, with our sons and with our daughters, with our flocks and with our herds we will go, for we must hold a feast unto Yahuah. And he said unto them, Let Yahuah be so with you, as I will let you go, and your little ones, look to it, for evil is before you. Not so. Go now, ye that are men, and serve Yahuah, for that ye did desire. And they were driven out from Pharaoh's presence. And Yahuah said unto Mosheh, Stretch out thine hand over the land of Egypt for the locusts, that they may come upon the land of Egypt, and may eat every herb of the land, even all that the hail hath left. Now notice what happens next. And I want to thank Sabina for her artwork. I asked her to draw a picture of, or paint a picture, I should say, of Mosheh stretching out his rod over the land of Egypt, and I think she did a fine job. Verse 13, And Mosheh stretched forth his rod over the land of Egypt, and Yahuah brought an east wind upon the land. When? All that day and all that night. And when it was boqer, that is morning, the east wind brought the locusts. And the locusts went up over all the land of Egypt, and rested in all the coasts of Egypt. Very grievous were they. Before them there were no such locusts as they, neither after them shall be such. Beginning the thorough investigation of the eighth plague, just what do the locusts know? Which option will the locusts prove true? Will the locusts have a forward progressive movement as seen in the dawn-to-dawn format? Or will we find a backwards movement, and may I add a jumbled movement in sunset theory? Is doubling back in time scriptural? Can we find that in the scripturals, or in the scriptures? An important question. Do you observe your Sabbaths beginning with sunset, as most Sabbath-keeping believers do? Or do you observe your Sabbaths starting at dawn, in alignment with the inspired scriptures? And here's a caution. Before you choose one of the options with the diagrams below, be advised that Covenant Calendar has over 30 calendar studies confirmed from the testimonies of the inspired scriptures that unmistakably expose one of the 24-hour cycles as truth. Your choice will either, number one, it will either be in the dawn-to-dawn format, where the light season leads out and the night season follows. If you choose this number one choice, this will place you in alignment with your Creator. But Yahushua restored our choice at the cross, or at the tree. So we all have a choice. What is our other choice? Here it is, number two. This is sunset theory, and this is where the night season starts the day. Yes, night starts the day. Does that work for you? Sunset to sunset, 24-hour cycle. Is this upheld by the scriptures? In this choice, it will place you in complete opposition to your Creator, Yahushua HaMashiach. Be careful of your choices. Next, the locust infestation, I should say, of Plague 8 will be demonstrated through a sunset theory format. Will the details of Exodus 10 lay out in a forward progressive movement? And here's a question for you to contemplate carefully. In these next verses that we're going to go through, we're going to have a very short review here. And I want you to think about this. Can you find where the 24-hour cycle changed from one point of time to the next new 24-hour cycle? Something to think about as we review these verses. Exodus 10:4. Else, if you refuse to let my people go, behold, tomorrow, that is machar, will I bring the locusts into your coasts. And they shall cover the face of the earth, that one cannot be able to see the earth, and they shall eat the remnant of that which is escaped, which remains unto you from the shall eat every tree which grows for the field. Exodus 10:12. And Yahuah to Mosheh, stretch out your hand over the land of Mitzrayim, the locusts, that they may come upon the land of Mitzrayim and eat every herb of the land, even all that the hail has left. And Moshe rod the land of Mitzrayim, and Yahuah brought an east wind upon the land all that day and all that night. And when it was morning, the east wind brought the locusts. Okay. Where in these verses did you find the 24-hour cycle changed from one point of time to the next new 24-hour cycle? Did you see it? A second 24-hour cycle is referred to in verse 4 using the word machar, or as we see it, tomorrow. And this is important. By default, there are two separate 24-hour cycles found between verses 4 and 13. Please do not miss this detail. The command of verse 4 was, if thou refuse to let my people go, behold, tomorrow will I bring the locusts into the coasts, into thy coasts. Tomorrow. Age 4279, machar, properly deferred the morrow, and usually adverbially tomorrow, indefinitely, and hereafter. And the KJV uses as time to come, tomorrow. Time to come is not inclusive. That means a future point of time. Exodus 10:13. And Yahuah brought an east wind upon the land all that day and all that night. And when it was morning, that is boqer, the east wind brought the locusts. That word boqer has an extremely important meaning. We're going to look at that shortly. And it's time to consider some Hebrew definitions. Day, 3117, yom. From an unused root meaning to be hot. A day, as the warm hours. Whether literal from sunrise to sunset. Day season only. Now, I want to bring your attention to this because this is what we see in our study sources. Many of them claims that sunrise to sunset is the day season only. Does that agree with your scriptures? What about in Genesis 1 where it shows us that the twilight mixtures, the one before sunrise and the one after sunset, are part of the light season? So why does this definition not have that? We need to be very, very careful about what we read. Everything must be tested with the Torah. Definition number 2, from one sunset to the next, a 24-hour cycle. Sunset to sunset. Interesting. I wonder where they got that. It certainly was not in the scriptures. Number 3, figurative. A place of time defined by an associated term, often used as an adverb. Note, The Genesis 1 study will show with exact detail how the dawn before sunrise and the dusk after sunset belong to only the day season hours. Hence, all that day will include the dusk moments right up to the night season. And here's Lael, as we see it in English as night, H3915. What does the definition say? A twist away of the light. There is no light in the night. That is the night season. Now we come to morning, H1242, boqer. From 1239, properly dawn, as the break of day. How many times in the last years have we read this as the break of day, and we just understood it as, oh yeah, the light comes up, great, no problem. But when we study the scriptures carefully as the break of day, this actually means, according to the scriptures, the start of the 24-hour cycle. It's not just the break of the light season. And it continues on, generally, morning. Early morning, morrow, end of night, coming of daylight, coming of sunrise, beginning of day, bright joy after night of distress, morrow, next day, and next morning. So how come it has here figuratively morrow, next day, and next morning? Why is that there? Have these people that wrote these definitions, have they been steeped in tradition where they believe that the sunset starts the day, or if they go by the Roman reckoning that midnight starts the day, and they have to declare morrow at dawn as figurative, and the next day and the next morning as figurative? What is their background? We need to be very, very careful when we look at these study sources. We must understand who wrote them and what they were trained in. Morrow, next day, and next morning. That is the start of the new 24-hour cycle. Let's consider some facts. In Scripture, a daylight season is considered to be the hours of the day, and it was a time for work. Nehemiah 4:21. So we labored in the work, and half of them held the spears. When? From the rising of the morning till the stars appeared. That was your light season of work. Mosheh had divine instructions to appear before Pharaoh very early in the morning, and that would be for plagues 1, 4, and 7. The patterns of Moses' arrival before Pharaoh will be examined next. And here's a thought to ponder. The following information will demonstrate a pattern through 3 witnesses of when Mosheh approaches Pharaoh. Basically, it was in the morning or early in the morning. Here's plague number 1. This is a plague of the blood, Exodus 7:15. Get thee unto Pharaoh in the morning. Lo, he goeth out into the water, or unto the water, and thou shalt stand by the river's brink against he come, and the rod which was turned into a serpent thou shalt take in thine hand. There is no written record of Mosheh before Pharaoh early or very early in the morning for plagues 2 and 3. What about plague 4? Plague 4 was the flies, Exodus 8:20. And Yahuah said unto Mosheh, rise up early in the morning, and stand before Pharaoh. Lo, he cometh forth to the water, and say unto him, Thus saith Yahuah, let my people go, that they may serve me. There is no written record for plagues 5 and 6 of Mosheh before Pharaoh early in the morning. But let's look at plague number 7. This is the plague of the hail, Exodus 9:13. And Yahuah said unto Mosheh, rise up early in the morning, that's the boqer, and stand before Pharaoh, and say unto him, Thus saith Yahuah, the Elohim of the Hebrews, let my people go, that they may serve me. Do you see the patterns for morning and very early in the morning? Let's move on to plague 8. This is locusts. This is the one we're looking at today. Exodus 10:1. And Yahuah said unto Mosheh, Go in unto Pharaoh. There is no written record for the specific time Mosheh met with Pharaoh for plague 8, as either early or very early in the morning. But what about plague number 9, the darkness? There is no written record of Mosheh before Pharaoh early in the morning for plague 9. Pharaoh commands Mosheh to never return. Have you noticed the pattern? There is enough written evidence for us to know that Mosheh was taking care of business when? In the morning hours. Does this pattern continue for plague number 10? What was plague number 10? That is the death of the firstborn at midnight, Exodus 12:29. And it came to pass that at midnight Yahuah smote all the firstborn in the land of Egypt. There is no written record of Mosheh before Pharaoh. The last plague falls at midnight, not morning. By the 10th plague, the pattern has changed. Plagues 1 to 9 occurrences were commanded in the morning hours of the day. Plague number 10 falls at midnight, the darkest part of the 24-hour cycle. Moses addressed every conflict in the boqer, or in the morning. Let's consider some facts. It is very likely that Mosheh and Aharon spoke with Pharaoh in the boqer, morning, for plagues 2, 3, 5, and 6, since on the 3 other days it was either early or very early in the morning, very early on boqer. Are you getting the idea that boqer is important? I hope so. Number 4. The events in Exodus 10:13 are for plague number 8, the locusts. This verse does not tell us if Mosheh appeared before Pharaoh either early in the morning or very early in the morning. So I ask you, when do you suppose Mosheh was before Pharaoh? When you consider the patterns, when was that? And considering some more here, however, the verse does say, when Mosheh stretched out his rod, an east wind blew all that day, not just part of the day, but all of it. So how much of that light season can we count out if it says all that day? Any of it? No. That gives us a pretty good clue that Mosheh was there very early in the boqer, in the morning. The hours of the daylight season definitely include the morning hours, and very likely the very early morning hours as part of the day. The wind continued to blow all that night. This is not to be confused with all the next night. And that next is not seen in the Hebrew. And this would also designate a new 24-hour cycle of time. This means the wind blew throughout the night season that was connected to the same 12-hour day season. Don't miss this point. And considering number 7, Mosheh stated the locusts would arrive on the next daylight season by using the word machar, or tomorrow. So we have 2 words here, boqer and machar, that help us out. Mosheh did not consider the approaching night season was to begin the next day. Scripture is totally silent about any interpretation for the beginning of a new cycle at sunset. Remember, in sunset theory, sunset is the moment when the light or season proceeds to the night, leil season. Only the absence of light is assured to us through the phrase, all that night. With sunset theory, every tomorrow begins at sunset, and that is perceived to be the beginning of a new day. A new day at darkness. But no, the locusts were, no locusts were to be found at that time. The locusts did not arrive at sunset. 12 hours passed before the clouds of locusts showed up. Why? Mosheh declared the locusts would arrive on the tomorrow, the machar. If the tomorrow began at sunset, why did the locusts not show up at sunset? This is why we do not read of a 12-hour delay in the locusts' arrival. It is very noteworthy that Yahuah acknowledges his own divine law, the Torah, where dawn begins the new cycle. Would you agree with this next statement? Locust's natural clock was correct. And just who was it that commissioned the locusts? Of course, it was Yahuah. He has control over this earth. He orchestrates things like this. Yahuah instructed the locusts. And we're going to see that written in the Hebrew coming up fairly soon. And I have asked to Vivian to help me out with this when the time comes. Yes, the locusts, they arrived exactly on time, just as Mosheh prophesied. What day? They arrived on the machar, the tomorrow, the next point of time, the next beginning of the next 24-hour cycle. What time? At boqer, or at dawn, the beginning of the next 24-hour cycle, the tomorrow. On the next slide, we'll be looking closely at the sunset theory style of reckoning time. The question is, will this reckoning provide forward progressive movement through the stories of the scriptures? Let's apply the words of the scriptures to charts and see the end results. And we are looking for forward progressive movement because Yahuah is not about confusion. Where will we find forward progressive movement? I have found lots of it in the dawn to dawn format. But we are going to be looking at the sunset theory chart number 1. And if you go into the middle, you'll see that gold post standing up, and above it's a nice little oval there. It says sunset. This is when sunsets tomorrow begins. At sunset, of course. That's what they teach. Number 1. Let's apply this to charts. Mosheh delivered the instructions when? In the morning, at dawn. And he said, tomorrow I will bring the locusts into thy coast. Sunset theory has tomorrow beginning at sunset. That is the next 24-hour beginning right there. So is this going to be correct? There's Mosheh stretching out his hands over Mitzrayim. And Mosheh stretched forth his rod over the land of Mitzrayim, and Yahuah brought an east wind upon the land all that day and all that night. The question I have, which cycle, is it number 1 or number 2, does this night of wind belong to? Which one? This is the choice we have to make. Sunset theory chart number 1. Pharaoh rejected Mosheh's request here at dawn. That's when he was chased out of Pharaoh's courts. Was the wind all this night? The previous night season? Was Mosheh's writings retroactive, pointing to the previous night season of wind? Will identifying a light season and then an event in the night season previous, will this be proper and accurate according to the Hebrew definitions? Why the Hebrew definitions? Because that is the original writings that Yahuah preserved for us, for our understanding, for our salvation. So yes, it is very important to get back to the original author's meaning, that they wanted and intended for us to understand. Perhaps Moshe's scriptural documentation using the highly specific words machar and boqer, maybe they're erroneous? Is that how we can make this sunset theory chart work? We can declare that Moshe didn't quite know how to write? And what about the forward progressive movement? No, forward progressive movement is not possible with sunset theory. It's backwards. Going to look a little closer at it. The sunset problem, number one. How can the chart show the morning arrival of the locusts without passing through the night season of cycle number 2 first? By Hebrew definition of machar, the locusts arrived on the morning after the light season that Moshe prophesied them to arrive. Machar. This is a categorized time following the previous 24-hour cycle. And I say categorized because it is not inclusive. There is a very, very specific point in time where it begins. Continuing, the sunset definition problem. The wind blew all that light season. That's light season number 1. And all that night season. Okay, we had to back up in time. Does this make sense? But this is what we have to do if we are applying the Hebrew word as it is written to a chart. Is this correct? And then we have to jump all the way forward to light season number 2, and the locusts arrived the next morning. That next morning, machar, categorized time following the previous 24-hour cycle. When they arrived at that morning, that is boqer, and that word boqer is going to have a very revealing definition for us coming up. So the question is, where does night season number 2 fit in? What Hebrew word is given to us to align this night season number 2? It's not in the text, not find. Or is it? Are we confused with sunset theory? Here's sunset problem number 2. The wind blew all that light season. And again, by Hebrew definition of machar, the locusts arrived on the morning after the light season that Moshe prophesied them to arrive. So again, what about this next night season? Why would it be next? It must be next if the sunset starts the 24-hour cycle. But the Hebrew words say nothing about a next night or a future point of time starting at sunset. It's totally void of that indication in the Hebrew. So why are we taught this? Sunset problem continued. The wind blew all that night, the wind blew all that light season and all that night season. Oops. Machar, or categorized time following the previous 24-hour cycle, begins here, according to sunset theory. How can that be? There is a full and total void of Hebrew words and or definitions that indicate this night season number 2 was the next and beginning of a sequential and separate 24-hour period. That Hebrew word or words do not exist, indicating that this time was a future 24-hour cycle starting at sunset. It does not exist. Not in the scriptures. Why we taught us. Note where cycle number 2 night season is located on the chart. The big red arrow points to it. At that position on this sunset theory chart, this night season does not belong to the scriptural account of that day, which is connected to cycle number 1 that records the event of Moshe stretching out his rod. And the wind blew all that day and all that night. How can that be night season number 2? The Hebrew words do not reveal that. Sunset's definition problem. On the sunset, night season number 2 follows the morning conversation Mosheh had with Pharaoh during the morning hours of cycle number 1. This sidesteps scriptural word definition alignment. Is this what we are to do? Are we to devise our own theory so that we can insert sunset theory? Or shall we accept the Hebrew words as Yahuah preserved them for us? Sunset's definition problem. The word machar, or tomorrow, gives full exposure to a categorized time frame, which follows a specific point of commencement. The locusts arrived at the beginning of the machar, tomorrow, arriving with the morning light. And how do we know it was the morning light? A locust fact. Mosheh informed Pharaoh the locusts would arrive on the next new cycle by using the explicit inspired word of machar, or tomorrow to be exact, and that would be a future separate cycle still to come. Sunset theory cannot align with the words of the scriptures. Here we are. After Mosheh conversed with Pharaoh in the morning, his inspired response was, Exodus 10:13, and Mosheh stretched forth his rod over the land of Mitzrayim, and Yahuah brought an east wind upon the land all that day and all that night. Is this possibly one 24-hour period, all that day and all that night? Here's where the problem enters the controversial equation. The problem is with the wind. The reason? Because it blew all night, which belonged to and is directly connected and linked to all that day. The question, the phrase all that night, is it directly referencing night season number 1 or night season number 2? Only one choice is available. Which is it? Let's proceed carefully. This is the choice that we need to make. Here, at night season number 1, Pharaoh, or Mosheh warns Pharaoh. Is machar here? Really? Machar at sunset? No. Option number 2. All that night belongs to night season number 2. If this is so, you have just defaulted to the next 24-hour period, cycle number 2, which no longer qualifies the night wind to be in the same 24-hour segment of time as the light season or the morning of Mosheh's prophetic locust announcement. Now, you might have to go back and read this study again to understand that clearly. Will the locust's testimony influence your thoughts? Here, let's look at sunset's definition collapse. We're going to have a close look at the Hebrew. Mosheh stretched forth his rod in the morning to bring in the wind all that day and what? So let's look closer at the Hebrew words. If you look on the right, you will see that there is a red box that come down and circle the Hebrew word. And below it is another box that gives us our English translations. Now, I'm going to bring in these boxes with the translations word by word, and we're going to go through these Hebrew words, and let's see what it says. Mosheh, he is stretching out his rod. Vivian, can you please tell me what this next word is?
It's the Aleph and the Tav. It's it. And it is what Yeshua says. He is the Aleph and the Tav. And in other scriptures, Yahweh says he is the Aleph and the Tav. When you see it in scriptures, in the Hebrew transliteration, studying it the way you have put it here, you know that the words coming after it are linked to Yeshua or Yahweh. Very powerful.
Thank you, Vivian. Yes. And we know that this command come from Yahusha, the Aleph Tav, for Moshe to stretch out his rod. So let's see what happens here. Moshe, he is stretching out the rod of him, and that is under the command of Yahusha, and he's stretching it out over the land of Mitzrayim. That's Egypt. So Moshe is stretching out his rod. And Yahuah, here's Yahuah's part. Yahuah, he drove the wind. He drove an east wind in the land, and all of the land, over all of it, all that day. You kind of have to read there a couple times because the Hebrew is written a little different than English, but it's all in all the day and all of the night. There is our description, our narrative. Has there been any Hebrew indication of an exchange in the 24-hour period yet? If not, when does the fully exposed transition of the 24-hour period reveal itself by Hebrew definition? And I've had people tell me, I don't need to know Hebrew. I don't need to know the definitions. I just read my English scriptures and I'm fine. Well, if we did not understand the Hebrew definitions, we could not be able to tell when the 24-hour cycle divided. So I'm asking you once again, up to this point, have you seen where it tells us that the 24-hour cycle was separated and divided? Was there a new 24-hour cycle started yet, is the question. What is the next word in this verse? The next word is boqer. And you've heard that because I emphasized it a whole bunch of times coming up to this point. What types of partition do these oxen create? Very strange slide all of a sudden. I bring up a pair of a pair of oxen and a plow with the word boqer. Why? What is the reasoning? Here's boqer. One of the Paleo Hebrew definitions is an ox pulling a plow. What does an ox pulling a plow have to do with the word boqer? Is there any correlation? So we ask ourselves, what does that plow do? Does it create a division, a separation, a parting? If you look on one side, you will see virgin ground untouched by a plow. If you look on the opposite side of the plow, we see a plowed field, two totally different identities. One side of the field is plowed, one side is not. There is a separation. When that ox pulls a plow, it divides one part of the field from the other. The plow divides, separates and divides. That is one of the reasons why there is a definition of an ox pulling a plow for the word boqer. What does this tell us? Sunset's definition, collapse, number 2 or part 2. This has been a complete description of the light season and the night season events up to this point. That next word, again, is boqer. The ox has accomplished his dividing duty with the plow and found within the next Hebrew word here, boqer. That division has been done. What does that mean to us? Boqer. Is that an important word? Absolutely. The ox has accomplished the dividing duty found within this Hebrew word, boqer. And the question at this point is, will the locusts arrive before the separation of the 24-hour cycles? Or will the locusts arrive after the ox's division? Which will it be? Again, boqer, in the morning, and it says he became, and the wind, that east wind, he carried. Vivian, can you help me with this again?
Oh, yes. And that ruach, that wind, it blew, and it was the aleph and the tav that caused that to blow. Powerful. The beginning and the end, it's Yeshua, it's Yahweh. They are echad, they are one, and that's who did it.
Thank you. So from what I hear, the Aleph Tav, or Yahusha, was controlling this east wind. What was in this east wind? The locusts. So when I asked you who controlled or who commissioned the locusts, here we have Hebrew word proof that Yahusha controlled the locusts. There is a direct link with this wind that carried the locusts. Yahusha, the Aleph Tav, was in absolute control. So at this boqer, what happened? The boqer then brought the locusts. The wind had carried these locusts. And there's that little locust. When did he arrive? At boqer on light season number 2. Here's a question for you. What action is needed to place this locust story back into full alignment with the Hebrew words and definitions? I say that a dawn-to-dawn restoration is needed. Night season must follow, not lead, for that is what we see in Genesis 1. Now please watch these light seasons and the night seasons. This needs to be restored back to creation. Light season must lead, not follow. I'm going to do this again because I want you to see this. Light season must be restored to its proper location as in Genesis 1. Light season must come first, and night season must be restored to its proper position as following. What happened? Mosheh stretched out his rod, and the wind blew all that day and all that night. Then came boqer. That is where the ox and the plow were doing the division, the separation of time. That is why boqer is there. At the very first light, boqer is the point of division, the time of separation of the 24-hour cycles. Does that have alignment with that second Hebrew word, machar, which means tomorrow, a future time? Yes, the two Hebrew words go hand in hand, perfect linear alignment. And that is when the locusts arrived, at the morning of the very next day. The further we investigate, the more we find sunset theory is infested with anti-scriptural ailments. To reemphasize, it is impossible to insert the information from Exodus 10:13 onto a sunset theory chart. Why? It's quite easy. The inspired word simply does not support sunset theory. It just does not work. Dawn. This is Zion's new day order, and Yahuah's divine institution is currently being restored. Let's have another look, shall we? Who told Mosheh to write machar, tomorrow, and boqer, morning when prophesying this advanced timing for the arrival of the locusts? For that answer, we'll look to Exodus 10:1. And Yahuah said unto Moshe, go in unto Pharaoh. Yahuah is the one that instructed it. So here we're going to look at a dawn-to-dawn format chart, and I hope you're going to be able to see the difference. Please note that the light season starts and the night season follows. So what happened here? Boqer, that is the morning, that is the very, very first light of dawn, well before sunrise. Boqer, Moshe spoke to Pharaoh, and he said, tomorrow, that is not at sunset, tomorrow being the next dawn, cycle number 2, tomorrow I will bring locusts within your borders. There's Moshe stretching out his rod over the land of Mitzrayim, and Yahuah brought an east wind upon the land. All that day, that's light season number 1, and all that night, that's night season number 1. What comes next? The boqer. There's that Hebrew word, boqer, where the ox pulls the plow, the division of the 24-hour cycles. At boqer, the morning came, and the east wind brought the locusts. Quite simple, actually, when you follow the Hebrew words. Tomorrow, the day which follows the present, the locusts will arrive. And this was declared by Mosheh, Exodus 10:4. The locusts would arrive with the light of dawn, or boqer. The boqer, the locusts, having received their appointed time instructions from our Creator, the Aleph Tav, Yahusha, arrived with perfect punctuality in the morning, and that is when the ox had reckoned time with the plow. That is under the Paleo-Hebrew understanding. We have just seen forward progressive movement. There has been no backtracking in time. Forward progressive movement, linear alignment. Choices. We have some choices to make. We have been taught one way, and now we read in the scriptures a different system. We must choose. If we don't choose, that choice will be made for us. We can choose for the dawn-to-dawn format, where there will be order and the word of truth from Yahuah, and we will find forward progressive movement. Or we can choose backwards movement, the traditions of men, sunset to sunset, and where order is not possible. Yes, choices. Let us remember the very strong counsel given in Jeremiah 33:20, 21, 25, and 26. Thus says Yahuah, if ye can break my covenant of the day and my covenant of the night, and that there should not be day and night in their season, then may also my covenant be broken with David my servant, that he should not have a son to reign upon his throne, and with the Leviim, the priests, my ministers. Thus saith Yahuah, if my covenant be not with the day and night, and if I have not appointed the ordinances of heaven and earth, then will I cast away the seed of Yaakov, and with David my servant, so that I will not take any of his seed to be rulers over the seed of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. For I will cause their captivity to return, and have mercy on them. Can it be said that Yahuah is taking this covenant of the night and day seriously? Is there ultra super important repercussions for anybody that declares the covenant of the light and the covenant of the night seasons different than how Yahuah has designated them? Can we change the covenant of the day and the covenant of the night without consequences? Season. late season and night season, especially now and when. The KJV says after, always, certain, continually, evening, long seasons. And it's even got meal time there. That's a good season. What about these seasons? The bottom line, if we break the Father's covenant of day and night, he has declared that he will break his covenant with us. And I look around outside what's happening on the earth today. And if there is one thing that I do not want broken, if there is one thing that I depend on, that is Yahuah's covenant to us, the covenant that he gave us, the covenant that Yahushua restored at Golgotha. No, I do not want this covenant broken. Where do you stand with Yahushua HaMashiach and his covenant? How is your faith today? On a rock or on sunset to sunset? Or should I say quicksand?